Progressive Change Campaign Committee co-founder Adam Green is here for more. Hi, Adam. Thanks for coming on. So your organization defended Platner through earlier controversies, but then pulled support after this sexual assault allegation. In hindsight, do you think you should have done more vetting or called for him to end his campaign earlier?
Well, I think those who recruited him probably should have done more vetting. We were not directly involved with that. However, I think the New York Times editorial board actually had a really powerful opinion piece yesterday saying that the Democratic Party needs to acknowledge that the vibe of the voters, the anger of the voters behind Graham Platner, something that is fueling winners all across the country, is real and should not discount his very personal failings as just a vetting problem. The Democratic Party needs a direction at this moment, and it's really unfortunate, and groups like ours honestly are quite upset with Graham Platner for muddying the waters, not telling people earlier, not even making the personal decision not to run, which he really should have done in retrospect, in a way that allowed there to be any doubt that voters are angry. They want shake up the system, economic fighters, and hopefully this convention process will give us someone who has clean hands and someone who will take that fight and defeat Susan Collins in the fall.
At least 7 candidates have officially announced that they're running to take Platner's spot. Who do you think gives Democrats the best chance in November?
Well, first and foremost, we've been focused on the process itself to make sure that everyday Mainers can attend the convention, have votes at the convention, and through that, make sure that we have the most popular candidate possible, and hopefully have something like ranked choice voting, which allows the ultimate nominee to have the most widespread support across the party. There are a couple candidates that seem like they'd probably be the progressive frontrunners. One is Troy Jackson, another is Shanna Bellows. Troy Jackson is a state legislator, comes from a very rural area of the state, has kind of progressive economic populist bona fides. Shanna Bellows is a longtime progressive warrior as well. She's a Secretary of State. She ran against Susan Collins 12 years ago, has gone on to become a legislator, become Secretary of State, and really kind of increase the arrows in her quiver. So those are two that we're looking at. Honestly, this might not be the time for a complete outsider in this state at this moment. So there's a guy who runs a beer company who's thinking about running. In ordinary circumstances, I might be like, intriguing. Maybe not this time. I think we need someone who has a record, who has a worldview, who is a shake-up-the-system economic fighter. And Shanna Bellows and Troy Jackson seem like they're the two that will get the most energy at the convention, but we'll find out.
The party hasn't released details yet on how the convention will work. You mentioned you're advocating for ranked choice voting. Why? Why do you think that's the right way?
So ranked choice voting is basically the process where voters can say, here's my first choice, here's my second choice. And we had a recent precedent where there was a governor's primary last month. The person who got the most votes actually didn't get the nomination because that person basically was trying to pull a fast one and get a slight plurality of the vote as opposed to having widespread support. And instead, a progressive named Hannah Pingree is now the nominee. Well, likewise, imagine a scenario where there's 7 people running at a 600-person convention. Let's say 6 of those 7 people support Medicare for all, taxing billionaires, shaking up the system, fighting for working families. And one of those candidates is funded by crypto and AI and APAC and other corporate interests. Should they skirt by with 90 votes? That makes no sense. Ranked choice voting means that leaving the convention will be the most unified behind a candidate that the most people can get behind. That's why. And that's important for defeating Susan Collins.
Got it. Democrats failed to elect Kamala Harris as a last-minute replacement for President Biden. How challenging is this race going to be now for whoever replaces Graham Platner?
Yeah, well, I will give credit to the Maine Democratic Party for coming up with a process that so far seems like it will actually give voters a choice. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the final details will fall in place. However, voters had no say in choosing Kamala Harris. And when she was on the debate stage with Donald Trump, our entire team was standing by, waiting to clip pieces of video and put them on the internet of her addressing economics with him and accusing him of being a tool for corporate power, which we've seen now. And she did not throw one punch on economics. There was a lot about abortion, some stuff about democracy, but the number one issue of the day was working people's issues. And she wasn't the right candidate for the moment. Well, fortunately, this is a better opportunity for actual people to have an actual voice and hopefully put forward somebody who can defeat Susan Collins by making clear that she not just voted lockstep to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, but voted lockstep every single time Donald Trump needs her vote at the behest of corporate oligarchs.